Hey, everybody! Welcome to Retire with Style. I'm Alex, and I'm here with my trusted companion and great acquaintance, Wade Pao.
Hey everyone. So I'm an acquaintance now, huh?
Yes. Well, can anyone really be? How many friends can you really have in this world, Wade?
A
Let's,
work colleague.
let's be honest. Yes, I have my work colleague, Wade Pao, my associate, my my bon vivant confidant. That's going nowhere. Let me just
Yeah,
intro
you're
this
going there.
thing and get going. Uh, so today we're gonna continue with our Q and A's, and we'll be talking about safe withdrawal rate and annuity questions. What do you think, Wade?
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, sounds like chocolate chip cookies. All right, let's get right to it. First question. I'll start it off here. I have been interested in an immediate annuity QLAC. Are those two things that go together?
Well, that's the whole. Yes, a QLAC is an immediate annuity because immediate means you annuitize immediately.
Okay, but all right, I see what you're saying. But okay, you can see where I was like, what?
That's the
I-
problem. Immediate and deferred means two different things
yeah,
in the annuity world.
yes. Okay. It's a
It's
new
a
type
it's a
one, but it's not. You're
it's a
not like
deferred
kind of.
immediate annuity.
Yeah, exactly. I have been interested. Let's take two. I have been interested in an immediate annuity QLAC. Two, one, diversify my income streams since I do not have a pension, but a lump sum that depends on market conditions. Two, help alleviate longevity risk since I have been waiting to take Social Security at 70 years this coming May. And three, the 200,000, that's the QLAC, is qualified and would not be counting towards my RMDs that I will start in 3 years, age 73, until I reach age 85, and will only count the RMD amount that comes out each year as income. Period. Question: is it better to keep the 200,000 in the market and have higher taxable income, or buy the QLAC? Thanks. Take it away, Mr. Fowl.
Yeah, this is the way the question is worded at the end. It's the classic. It depends what you're more comfortable with.
Have you
But
taken
right,
the
the qualified longevity annuity contract. It's a deeply deferred income annuity, and so as the person has
No,
described
no,
me
no.
here,
It's a deeply deferred immediate
that's right.
income. No. Go
But you're going to purchase this at age 70, turn on with it turning on income at age 85. So there's a 15-year deferral period, and that tax benefit being addressed here is that 200,000 is now taken out of the RMD picture, so that you're not having to pay the RMDs on it between ages 73 and 85. And then once those income payments begin at 85, it's taxable. All annuity payments coming out of a retirement account are taxable ordinary income. So you do get the little benefit there in terms of deferring some of your required minimum distributions. It is an immediate annuity. It's protected lifetime income that begins later in life, which reduces the costs. For $200,000, you're going to get a nice chunk of income starting at age 85. And the other benefit, and also, yes, helping to manage longevity risk. In a way, you can kind of, okay, if I can make it to 85, I'll be okay after that, because alongside Social Security and any pensions or anything, I now have this QLAC turning on as well. It's going to provide me some additional income. So yeah, absolutely, the case was made in a strong manner for the QLAC. Then the question is really just taking this turn of, well, should I do that, or should I leave my money invested in the market? And
Yeah.
that's where
I would start with where you start off at that point, which is this is the biggest issue, that the biggest misconception or the biggest marketing kind of judo that they like to play with us on is an annuity and our investments are two separate things. Think of an annuity as an insurance product and think of an investment as an investment, right? And so the reality is your decision to get the QLAC is based on an insurance decision that you're making, which is I don't want to worry about running out of money when before I die. And a lot of folks refer to QLACs as almost like a a dementia kind of insurance as well, where as you get in those later stages, in case anything happens, you've kind of automated things, right, for the rest of your life. And so you have to be those have to be the salient reasons why you do a QLAC. It's not a, hey, will I get more of this and that's not the way to look at it. It's not an investment product. It's an insurance product. Now, that being the case, having something like that in place, the question I wouldn't ask is, hey, what can I make more, as opposed to putting $200,000 in that now and not really seeing those benefits for 15 years. Can I make more with that 200,000 for 15 years than what I could? That's not the way I would look at it. I would look at, because they're two different things, right? I would look at it as, that's insurance. So now you've protected yourself from, age 85 onward. And so the question is, can you potentially be more aggressive with your investments if you wanted to, knowing that you have that safety net down the line? I would venture to say the answer would be most likely more yes than no. Let me say it like that. And that's the dynamic those are the trade-offs I would be asking myself. Wait.
Yeah, and you're not necessarily sacrificing a lot of the upside in those early years. And if you end up living a very long time, you could potentially leave a larger legacy through the use of a QLAC, and thinking in particular allocating from bonds to purchase the QLAC, not necessarily allocating from stocks to purchase the QLAC. But if your retirement income style is more total returns, you're probably going to lean more towards just feeling more comfortable having the money in the market and not making that irreversible commitment to the QLAC. If your income protection, the QLAC can be a great way to build that longevity risk protection and insurance into the plan. And even if your time segmentation, where you think about buckets, you might really frame that QLAC as, here's a bucket to cover my long-term needs. I don't have to worry about that anymore. So I think you'll see the QLAC would probably appeal the most to income protection, maybe second place time segmentation. It could be a tool to consider with risk wrap as well. And then it would be total returns is the least likely to resonate with the story of what the QLAC can offer to the retirement plan.
No, and wait, I'll bring my own personal stuff. As I'm layering my stuff in, and I fell in that income protection bracket, I'm more looking at a QLAC to give me that layer down the line. Although, you're limited by 200,000. I wish I could put more, frankly. But for argument's sake, the QLAC, and as I mentioned in the last episode, just jamming on that HSA as much as possible. Those are kind of going to be cornerstones for me. So, but I'm not looking at the QLAC as, oh, okay, it's going to outperform the S&P or anything like that. I don't care. It's an insurance thing that I can lock in. I don't have to worry about. I don't want, like, even my wife worrying about if something were to happen to me, at a certain age. I don't want her worrying about, but the market. I want to make sure we can get something going.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the payout would be from age 70. I know just with interest rates having come up, I checked recently about if you bought a QLAC in your mid-40s and didn't get the cash refund and had it turn on at age 85, I think the payout rate was more than 100%. So you'd be looking at more than $200,000 a year of income. Now, that's not inflation adjusted. And that's really the only downside potentially with the QLAC is, what the income payments will be in nominal terms, but who knows what inflation is going to be over the next however many years to know how much purchasing power you're going to be generating with that.
Well, this podcast was recorded the day after Powell's speech on inflation. So Wade, why don't you give us your thoughts on what Powell said and what the minutes covered and where you think things are going?
Where interest rates did not change.
All right. Next question. What is the best way to use a SPIA? And that's, again, we're using acronyms, so Single Premium Immediate Annuity. What is the best way to use a SPIA in combination with an FIA, Fixed Index Annuity? And is it better to invest a large sum in a FIA at one time or a little each month?
And with this question, we were talking a little bit before the episode, sometimes it's necessary to try to guess what's really being asked. But I can't do it with this question. I'm not entirely sure. Like combining a SPIA with an FIA, there are two different types of annuities. I don't know if the question was trying to get at, should I use a SPIA or an FIA with a living benefit, or whether maybe they were thinking the FIA is the living benefit, or...
Are you thinking the island of Dr. Moreau?
Right. Yeah, I'm just not entirely sure what to do with this question. If you're going the SPIA route, you probably don't also want a living benefit on the FIA unless you're looking to blend your income. So part SPIA, part FIA with living benefit. But if you don't put the living benefit on the FIA, you're using it more as a bond alternative. And we talk about that a lot with the time segmentation. It's potentially a way to fill those short-term spending buckets with tax deferral, and then with a yield that may be competitive with anything bonds can provide.
Let me ask it. Let me ask it this way, just to see if it jiggers something in your head. Does an FIA could an FIA potentially have all the attributes of a SPIA and then some? Hence, just get an FIA. It may not pay out as much on a monthly basis because it's not maximizing the mortality credits as much as a SPIA, but it has some characteristics of a SPIA inside of an FIA where you don't see that the other way around. So you may be better off focusing on a FIA and triggering, whatever riders you want that kind of give you more SPIA-like characteristics.
Yeah. The FIA with a lifetime income benefit behaves the same way as a SPIA in terms of providing a guaranteed lifetime income. It actually has additional benefits because there's some liquidity. You can get the contract value back out if you decide you no longer want this. And you have some limited growth potential opportunities for the underlying asset. So in theory, the payout rate on the FIA with living benefits should be lower than the payout rate on the SPIA. But in practice, sometimes you find the FIA with a living benefit may have a higher payout rate than the SPIA. And that's really a function of this idea of lapsation pricing, or behavioral mistakes. If you buy a SPIA, you can't make a mistake. You can't forget to turn on your income. You can't forget anything. It's an irreversible decision. You're going to get those payments into your bank account every month, whether you like it or not.
Day one, boom.
With an FIA, you can pay for the protection, for the living benefit, and never actually get around to taking out the distributions you're allowed to take out. And so you're paying for insurance that you're not using. And the reality is a lot of people end up doing that. And so through competitive pricing, that can allow the payout rates on FIA living benefits to be higher than SPIA payout rates.
So
if you find one of those, it's like, well, I've got a higher payout rate, I've got liquidity, I've got some potential growth in the underlying asset base in the early years. I wouldn't say a no-brainer, but at least there's not a lot of downsides to going the FIA route in that sort of scenario.
Exactly. I think I want to say this in another way, just because I think this lapsation thing is something that I'm not so sure it's fully appreciated. And so let's say actuarially, the fair price for this FIA, the month they're going to give you on a rider is like $1, right? Actuarially speaking. But the folks that if you buy a SPIA, you're kind of getting an immediate annuity. You're getting a pension from day one, so it's automated immediately. But an FIA, you're going to own it for a few years before you activate it or not, et cetera, et cetera. So even though actuarially they can say, I'm going to give you $1 of income per year, they can put on their, they can commit to, let's say, $1.04 a year. Technically, it shouldn't go that high, but they know that a lot of folks will buy the FIA, and after 5-6 years, they just don't support it anymore, switch out of it. Once they're out of their grace period, or they get out of it or whatever, and so they're never on the hook, the insurance company. So they can kind of give you more than the expectation is because people will lapse on the policy. There's a certain, there's a certain run rate. I don't know what it is. Wait, do you know off the top of your head? 10%.
No, I don't.
There's a certain.
This is the mechanism.
Yeah, there's a consistent lapsing that the insurance companies know that these folks will never, will get out of it at some point because that's just how it is. And so they can promise you a little bit higher on the backs of those people. They're not dying, but they're
who pay for the living benefit and don't use it.
Exactly. That's another way of looking at it. Now, the last part of that question is, are they better off effectively dollar cost averaging into an FIA or just cutting a check at once?
Yeah, and that's where, again, that seems to be a question that's more relevant for a SPIA than an FIA. And with the SPIA, it's, do I want to purchase all the income at once, or do I want to ladder in it over time? And there's benefits and disadvantages of each approach. If you ladder in over time, You get more diversification around the interest rate environment when you're making those purchases. You get the optionality of, if I buy it all today and then a year later I find out of a terminal illness or something, I could stop making those additional purchases. So you maintain more flexibility by laddering it over time. Everything else being the same, you can make a case for considering laddering in purchases over time rather than doing it all at once. But with the FIA, because it's liquid and you have the flexibility, there may be surrender charges if you want your money out. But I don't think it's whatever you're thinking of put in an FIA, you can go ahead and do that. You don't really have to specifically think about laddering it in over time, unless you're wanting to get. Maybe the reason to ask this is, since usually there's going to be terms that are very much linked to the date of purchase, and then each anniversary subsequently, I guess you could benefit from diversifying on when those anniversary dates are. But yeah, actually, as I say that now, that might be a reason to ladder in the FIA purchases. But I think you do have flexibility. It's not obvious that one way or the other is going to be better for you.
Okay. But it's a different dynamic than the folks that asked, do I dollar cost average into the market? It's just a different,
right?
Different considerations. Okay. How do you suggest using a quote unquote safe plan withdrawal percentage rate, all other factors being equal? Supposing that inflation is presumed at 3% and there are no bear markets to contend with, none of which is probable. But I'm going to ask it anyways, I guess. That's me. While including the required minimum distribution as a factor. So how do you suggest choosing a safe plan withdrawal percentage rate when everything comes up roses?
But there's RMDs.
Yeah, and the RMDs.
This kind of question comes up a lot with RMDs. And the general issue is you're not forced to spend your required minimum distributions. You're just forced to take it out of the retirement account. You can then reinvest it into a taxable brokerage account. The problem is you are forced to pay taxes on it. And that's where if you get an RMD surprise, you could be paying at a high effective marginal tax rate with the impacts of Social Security and Medicare premiums and preferential income stacking that you have to deal with in the tax code. But the RMD in and of itself doesn't do anything other than force you to pay some taxes. So it doesn't really impact safe withdrawal rate type questions or anything of that nature. It's just you do have to account for the fact I'm going to have to pay some taxes. That does potentially create a little more sequence of returns risk for you, although we're presuming there is no sequence of returns risk. But you have to fund the taxes would be really the only consideration with this.
And then just reinvest
question.
it. And when you reinvest it, the cost base is at that reinvestment rate.
Well, the purchase. Yeah, when it goes into the taxable account. Mm-hmm. There was another question too before that one is also on a similar theme. Yeah, what is your strategy for sequence of returns risk when starting RMDs? How much in cash or bonds to draw on in a down market? And I think it's kind of a related question. It's the practical impact of RMDs is you're going to have to pay some taxes. And a fixed expense that you have to take no matter what the market is doing can create sequence risk if you are having to take that distribution from a volatile portfolio. So there's a number of different ways to manage sequence risk, and whatever your preferred approach is, you want to be accounting for the fact that I'm going to have this required payment not required. I'm going to have to spend from my assets to pay taxes on my RMDs. So I want to consider how can I manage sequence risk for that distribution I need to pay my taxes with.
I think the most important part of these two questions for me, you said it briefly, but I think that would be my first concern. Secondarily, I may be worried about the questions that they have, but the first concern is you have to take those distributions because the government wants their money back, on the tax deferral, right? Eventually, they want it back, and RMDs is developed so that they take back each year relative to when you die, you've been paid in full, right? They're paid in full. So that's one of those things. So they're going to want their taxes. Clients a lot of times think they have to spend it, but no, as Wade pointed out, you just have to take it out because pay the taxable portion on that, and then that moment you can just put it in a taxable account, so you're invested again. To me, the more important question to be asking is, how does that play into how your Social Security and such and such, so you can give yourself the best possible chance to be in the lowest tax bracket while you're doing some significant harvesting of those RMDs. It's really more a tax game question for me, to make it more efficient than worrying about what's the right safe withdrawal rate around this, because of all these things that they put in. I don't know. Wait, thoughts?
No, I think you nailed it there, and it's not. It's more of a tax question. It's not a safe withdrawal rate question, and the only reason it would impact safe withdrawal rates is just because of this idea that you have to account for having some distributions to pay taxes that you wouldn't have had if RMDs didn't exist. That's its only practical impact on sequence risk and safe withdrawal rates.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say too, and this goes back to more the semantics. I personally don't like the phrase safe withdrawal rate. There is no safe withdrawal rate on volatile assets. Just call it withdrawal rate. I'm being nitpicky, and I'm being too cute by half. I get it, but I don't want to evoke the word safe when it's total return.
Yeah, and to be fair, this question did have safe in parentheses.
Yeah, I get it.
But when we were reading it, yes,
right.
There is no such thing as a safe withdrawal rate from a volatile investment portfolio.
Do buffer assets reduce the effect of sequence risk? If I have a buffer asset, is it reasonable to assume a higher quote unquote safe withdrawal rate if I'm able to avoid selling at a loss?
Yes. If you have buffer assets, that can support a higher withdrawal rate than if you didn't have buffer assets. Now, specifically, when I talk about a buffer asset, I talk about it not being part of the portfolio. It's something on the side. So when I calculate the withdrawal rate, it's not the withdrawal rate on the portfolio plus the buffer asset. It's just the withdrawal rate on the portfolio. And naturally, if you have something that's not part of the portfolio that you can spend from on occasion, that allows for a higher withdrawal rate from the portfolio. So just almost by definition, with buffer assets, you can use a higher withdrawal rate. But also there's the synergies of the sequence of returns risk. And this is something I talk about a lot, more so in the reverse mortgage book, because one of the classic buffer assets is a reverse mortgage. This idea that if your portfolio is in trouble, or it looks to be down relative to where you'd like it to be, being able to draw from the buffer asset temporarily, not having to sell from the portfolio, helps you avoid digging a hole for that portfolio and gives your portfolio more chance to recover. And the synergies from doing that really help to increase that quote unquote safe withdrawal rate even higher. A buffer asset is one of 4 broad techniques for managing sequence of returns risk. And because it reduces sequence of returns risk, it can allow for a higher initial withdrawal rate for that retirement plan.
So you're saying a buffer asset is almost like a proxy plan B time segmentation strategy?
Well, it's I treat it as
I'm messing with you.
No, I treat buffer assets as distinct from time segmentation, but they can be, sometimes they get confused or talked about as the same.
When you're actually utilizing the buffer asset, it kind of is. You know what I mean? Well, when you time of utilization, a bucket kind of thing for that particular time period.
Time segmentation is you have a short-term bucket that you're systematically spending from to cover expenses. A buffer asset is you have this kind of short-term bucket, but it's sitting off on the sidelines. You don't really treat it as part of your portfolio, and you have the discretion to tap into it when necessary, but otherwise it's just sitting on the sidelines.
It's kind of when I'm in the holiday party and I'm sitting at that table.
Off by yourself in the corner.
Yes.
No one will talk to you.
Yes, just waiting, watching you pass by, not making eye contact.
All your work colleagues.
Until you need me to get you a drink or something. All right. Pension annuities and Social Security provide a guaranteed monthly benefit, but they also have the advantage of being automatic and less subject to theft, dementia issues, stress for a surviving spouse, etc. Is there a similar approach for equity investments? Something automatic? I'll just, you can't have it both ways. You know, if you really just take a step back, you know, there is no magic in the world, right? The reason you're compensated for equity investments is because you're bearing risks. If you weren't compensated for bearing those risks, then everyone would just put it in the bond market, right? If you had the same expected return for bonds and stocks, no one would deal with the aggravation of the volatility and just buy bonds, right? And so at the heart of it, you have to start from there, just theoretically. The only reason you're compensated for investing in equities is not because it's some magical thing where, okay, I'm going to put money here and 10 years later, it's just going to be more because that's how it is. No, you're compensated for taking risk. When there isn't risks to bear, there are no returns. It just can't, you can't, it can't go it can't go both ways. If not, economics wouldn't work. But wait,
Yeah, that's right. And I guess the only thing I could offer there is something called managed payout funds. They
oh my
never really took
goodness!
off.
No, I'm kidding.
They still exist. They're rare. They never really took off, but it is an effort in a mutual fund with a diversified portfolio for the fund managers to kick off distributions to the shareholders to try to replicate the idea of what an annuity would do. But there's no guarantees behind it. It is so it's not going to get all the features that the annuity provides, but at least the being automatic part, well, it would still be subject to theft. There's still could be dementia issues unless you just leave it alone. But maybe reduce stress for the surviving spouse. Not a guaranteed monthly benefit, but at least a managed payout fund is a way to automate because there's these two problems people face with an investment portfolio in retirement. One is asset allocation. The other is how much should I spend? The managed payout, well, any mutual fund covers the asset allocation. You have fund managers picking the assets. The managed payout fund was the additional effort to not only will the fund manager choose the assets for the portfolio, but they'll also manage the distributions from the portfolio. So to seek that professional management for both of those aspects gives you something that you might want to look at and consider. But yeah, it's never going to be offering all the advantages of insurance in that regard.
Okay. Wait, I wanna throw in one more question because I think you can guess who wrote this question. And it's a good one, and we got some time here. Is that all right? Can I throw one in there?
Okay, this is off the cuff here.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts for someone who has been at the same job a very long time, is basically sick of the organization, colleagues, and work? This is Bob, isn't it?
I
Damn it,
remember
I gotta
seeing
call
that
Bob.
question.
Should we bring him in? Let's bring him in. Let's bridge him in and just have him ask me and look at me in the eyes when he's saying this. No, do you have any thoughts for someone who has been at the same job for a very long time, is basically sick of the organization, colleagues, and work? Mostly not their fault. I've been there for over 2 decades, but is afraid to retire because of the uncertainties of the economy and of whether I can find a part-time job in retirement at the same level that pays as well. Do many people hang on to a played out full-time employment situation out of fear? Yeah, let me text Bob real quick, see what he thinks about. No, uh, I would say, real quick, just as us, we have, as someone that oversees a team, I wouldn't be surprised if people aren't picking up on your kind of emotional well-being already. It's one of those things, in my experience, people that eventually maybe quit or are let go of, or there's a transition, it's kind of something that has been brewing for a while. And if you hand over your heart, if an employer does an honest assessment, those they can see signs of it. Obviously, there's always this backcasting piece of it where you're kind of rationalizing, oh yes, putting it together, but you kind of know. And if you're feeling like this and you're writing this in, you I would I would I would take a reasoned bet that there's seeds of discontent are visible throughout. So just, FYI. Do people hang around to play it out full-time employment situations out of fear? We
And
did
also
this with
health insurance.
for health insurance, perhaps, but I would say this, and I don't know the exact number, but we've seen studies of this, Wade. We've done this. I think Kyle wrote something on this. It's twice I've mentioned him in podcasts, right? He's an advisor. He's no longer with us. He retired, etc. Voluntarily, by the way. But I think people over age 50 and they're like trying to like off ramp into retirement. I don't know the exact number, but over 50% and maybe less than 65% of them are let go of before they actually retire. So an alarmingly high number of people are actually let go of, as when in their mind they think they're going to retire in a few years. That happens with great frequency. So I think, again, if you're saying sick of the organization, colleagues, and work, I wouldn't be surprised if that's not visible already, and things are hanging, things are there. So the answer is I think you may get let go before you effectively retire. But this is not a retire with style retirement income question. This is just kind of what we see in the data and just anecdotally what you notice in firms. That's how I would answer that one. Wait.
Yeah, well, we did try to answer all the questions, though there was a small handful that I didn't put into one of the topics because I just didn't have a lot of good thoughts on them. And this was one of those questions. But yeah, healthcare can be a lot of people just hang on for fear because they need health insurance. Now, the Affordable Care Act does make that easier. That if you really are not enjoying the job or that you're in, even if it requires a pay cut and so forth, maybe there is something else you can do that would provide more fulfillment. And at the end of the day, not everything's financial. And I think a lot of our listeners may also, they may be in good financial positions and not fully appreciate that everyone's always worried about running out of money. But if you do a detailed financial assessment, just look at the possibility that maybe you are able to make some changes, even if it does require less pay, and still make things work out. And that might give you more life satisfaction than continuing at a job you really don't like.
Yeah. And look, when it comes to salary, you can, it's never about the money. It's always about the money, that kind of thing. And I get it. But if you really are already sick of it, and I get it, it's easy for me to say because I don't know the entirety of the context. But if you really are sick of it and you don't find that your heart's in it, your performance probably isn't in it as well, and that's visible, and you may be better off just looking for a job that you can also potentially part-time it into retirement if you want to. We're big fans of the phrase retire into something, not away from something. And so maybe this could be a good transition spot. And if it doesn't pay you as much, but you're able to do it for, I'm making up numbers now, 15 more years in a manner in which you like, as opposed to biting the bullet for 5 years and potentially getting fired though in year 3, and then needing to look for something and being out of a job for 4 or 5 years, or doing something really because you had no other choice and you took it, there's a break even there as well. And so I'm always a big fan of take control of, control what you can control. Obviously life is going to be random, but if you can control what you can control and nip things off at the bud, or if you will, I think that may be a better overall strategy, because again, well over 50% of the folks that are over 50 get fired before they want to voluntarily retire.
And it's not just getting fired, but also health problems arise, or needing to become a caretaker. But I think with all the different possible reasons, the majority of people retire sooner than they estimated they would retire.
What do you think, Wade? Should we be a lifestyle podcast? Should we become...
Right. I don't think so. I'm more of a quantitative guy.
No, all right. Again, and this is not retire with style kind of material, but is asked. We're human beings. This is my take. Take it for what it's worth. All righty. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time as always, and we're gonna do more Q questions next
Yeah,
week.
no, this was the last Q&A episode, and I think even there was a handful of questions I didn't put into any of the episodes, but I think we actually ended up covering most of them. As there's still, you have that right in front of you. Maybe there's one or two still on that list. But there's one question I
Your
simply
buffer
didn't know the
assets,
answer
we
to.
did documentation on the payroll calculator.
Oh yeah, that's been
All right. I
taken
just
care
said
of.
that. This is where we have a obviously retirementresearcher.com. We have effectively a membership site where folks can learn, and we have resources. And someone's asking about one of the resources there, the payroll calculator. I will forward this on to Bob. And
No, that we've already taken care of that.
okay,
Separate from the podcast.
okay, then perfect. And then the last question. It's too long for me to read, Wade, on the fly, but
Well, you're talking about the one that I didn't know the answer to.
oh, don't know the answer to. Yeah. How about we email that guy when we get to it? But it seems health related, so when we do Medicare and stuff like that, we can deal with it. All right.
All right.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So this is the last Q&A episode. We'll move on to other topics.
Excellent. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.